But I wanted to start off with literally the book itself, not the double yoke, the book itself. This is a Pelican book, and both of us were talking beforehand, is for those of you who remember when Pelican books were this fantastic entry to knowledge and then disappeared, I think probably sometime, maybe the early 70s or late 60s, and you are now part of this new thing that's happened in the 21st century. So in terms of your learning, how much of a part did Pelican play for the autodidact?
Incredible important bit. The autodidact books, and I remember having a shelf, which I've still got, of blue-covered books on anarchism, on history of England, and things like that. All those ones. And they had one on statistics, and boring, which was immensely dull, which is why I wanted to write another one. And so when they started the imprint again, I've been delighted. Now done 3 of these, and I'm really delighted to work with this imprint because it means that one can write in a shamelessly educational way. And I'm not apologizing for the fact that at the end of every chapter, I put a list of points that I could test you on, that you should have got from this chapter, and to make it really clear how it's going. And also, it means that I really think about the structure of it. I got a spreadsheet where I worked out each chapter and how the argument develops and when it refers backwards and forwards. A bit like plotting a detective novel or something like that. Because at the end of it, I want to get to a certain point, a certain conclusion, and I don't want to ramble around so much. I mean, I've got to be honest. I don't read the sort of books I write, because I find them usually immensely tedious because they just long anecdotes and rambling on all over the place, taking ages to tell a story, pages. I think, why? Come on, what's the point? Tell me what. I got a very short attention span. If it doesn't grab me, I just lose track, and I just no idea what's going on. And so that's why all my stories are mercifully short, and I collect together the arguments at the end of the chapter, because it's an autodidact book. It's for people who actually want to learn something.
Well, I was saying to you, I really enjoy your books, and I do find that even if I don't mean to, I learn something by the end of it. And it is, and I wonder, how important that idea of communicating this idea, these ideas of what probability might actually be, of statistics, of these things that we are surrounded by very often, though, as we know with newspapers, etc. We've done a lot of shows together where you've just said, well, that's basically rubbish, and that they've managed to create this statistic through that. So what was the first kind of drive that you have when you start writing a book? What are you hoping how that reader's life is going to change?
I think it's because I think the ideas in there are important. I've struggled with them myself for 50 years, ever since I was a student, and so I think they're interesting to know about, and I think it provides. Again, where the point of the Pelican book is to provide a structure on a subject which you may know bits about, but it's all a little bit of an unfiltered, maybe confusion, luck, ignorance, coincidence, chance, probability, randomness, all those things I try to put into a reasonably coherent structure. So I think that's what I'm trying to do, is to take, in a way, everyday things and make them a bit more comprehensible. It's trying to raise the level of the discussion. I haven't got a big agenda about, I haven't got an ideology I'm trying to push at all, except to try to, I don't know, in one way I'm trying to increase some skepticism about the claims that are being made, the models that are used, all the claims we read in the newspapers all the time. So, art of statistics and that is quite a lot about taking apart the claims that people make, because it's the one thing that people who come from my, mathematics, I did pure maths and then turned into statistics and things. I'm a card-carrying nerd, and one thing that nerds tend to feel is they don't have a strong ideology about, particularly about how the world should work. What really pisses them off is people saying stupid things. And that's the idea. That's what they get fed up with and feel actually very emotional about and can get very angry about.
Well, that's what I feel with a lot of your, and with this book as well, which is, it's not like you're giving us answers as much as you're giving us the weaponry to ask better questions.
Yeah, that's what it's all about, and that's really what I do all the time, because my job has been for years is critiquing claims, and which means asking, checking, knowing what questions to ask. which you can increasingly use AI for, by the way. I must say, some of it's really good. I really think sometimes I'm out of a job. I ask it questions, and it comes out with why this is a bad argument. And I think, I'm out of a job here. It's rather good. Of course, it may be wrong, because it just makes things up occasionally. So that is one of the problems. So no, that's part of what I do. It's what statisticians do. People say statisticians are evidence policemen. They go around saying, no, you can't do that. No, more than my job's worth, you can't do that. And telling people off from drawing inappropriate conclusions.
So I want to do, this is one that has always fascinated me. Is it 27 people in a room and there's a 50% chance of them having two of the people sharing a birthday?
23.
23,
okay,
right. So should we work out, right, so 23.
I'm going to do the first
You do the whole,
One,
right.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. We could do up to 25, but otherwise... Okay, did you see yourself? First 5 rows, except you two. So 23. But I'm going to do 2 things. First of all, you've got to say your birthday. And if you hear your matching birthday, put your hand up. We don't have to go through everybody. But the other thing I want you to do is do the last 2 digits of your mobile phone number. Basically because the birthday one, there's only a 50-50 chance of me winning, but the 2 phone numbers, there's more than a 90% chance that 2 of you have got the same last digits of the last 2 numbers. So there's 23 of you, but it's almost certain, well, very, very likely. I should be so unlucky if I don't get matching digits. If I don't get a matching birthday, well, it's 50-50. Right, we're going to start. Birthday and last 2 digits, and if you hear it, stick your hand up. Yes?
13th of May and 9-2.
2nd of March, 9-0.
Close.
11th March.
11th March, yep. 3-5.
29th of April and 30.
What was it, 30?
Yeah.
30, yep.
25th June, 1-5.
Yep.
9th of March, 8-3. 15th March, 6-2.
No matter, okay.
31st of May, 9-1.
19th of May, 6-9.
23rd of December, 2-0.
14 March, 3-1.
Yep.
13 February, 6-3.
24th June, 7-8.
24th, was there another 20? Oh, yeah, okay, 7-8, yep.
28th December, 8-6.
Yep.
11th of September, 7-7.
28th of May, 2-8.
Oh.
9th of August, 6-8.
25th of November, 3-5.
1st of January, 5-4.
4th of July, 1-4. 5th of April, 7-6.
26th of January, 1-1.
12th of November, 0-8.
Well, that's just the point I wanted to make.
This is not a random distribution of people.
Well, no, it's not. But the birthday should be actually random. Of course, there's no randomness at all. You know, you got your birthday, and it's where you happen to sit. So there's no real randomness there. So it should be effectively random, and I've effectively lost because
I've literally never seen this work, and you always tell me it does at some point.
But the phone numbers, that is ridiculous. That is a more than 90% chance, and I've lost.
So
it
if we
goes to show, I will remember this event. Right, okay.
So if we were studying ESP like J.B. Rhine did,
Yeah.
do you remember that story? Which is J.B. Rhine, who did a lot of, and basically to show that we did have extrasensory perception, but then he did remove all of the ones that were really way off and didn't match at all because he felt they were such outliers. So that's how he made. So, you know, if you were unscrupulous, but I do also know, by the way, it's a security scam and he is going to manage to hack about 5 of your phones. But you know, do we? I mean, how often do we see that in science? I would imagine in the history of science we have seen, especially when it's come to sometimes say pseudoscience, we've seen that bit where we go, well, we're never actually going to mention this group at all again. They don't count in the 50% due to being such outliers. It was so unlikely they wouldn't have the same things, therefore they never existed.
Well, in the book I talk about, you know, early sort of Michelson doing the speed of light and what's his name doing the something or other. I can't remember who it was, doing the oil drop experiment.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, where, you know, when they went through their notebooks, they realized that he had eliminated a large number of observations because they didn't fit. Bit too low, bit high, etc. Now he ended up, fortunately almost, he ended up taking just as many from the bottom as the top. So he ended up with a really good estimate, but hopelessly too precise, his estimate was, because his results were so tightly clustered. So in fact, when you looked at the interval he gave, it didn't include the true value. And if he had actually kept all his observations in and been more honest, then actually he might have included the true value in his uncertainty interval. So that, picking and choosing observations clearly is really, really bad practice. But some do it better than others.
Well, Gregor Mendel, I think, as far as I know, with his P experiments, they were like, yeah, I'm not going to mention those ones, though, because I'm pretty certain I'm right, and they really do spoil it.
They fitted the data, they fitted the model too well. Yeah.
And I was wondering, right, the one that we were talking about before, which is, how many of you know about the Monty Hall problem? Do any of you know the Monty Hall problem? Now, your book is quite a rare book on probability and statistics, because it doesn't have the Monty Hall problem.
I hate it.
So, can you first of all just explain the Monty Hall problem and the reason that you don't include it in the book?
Okay, I should really have three cups here, and I put a prize under one cup, and you don't know which cup it is, and then I say, okay, you've got to try to find the cup with the thing underneath it, and there's two cups that haven't got it, so I point to the two cups. I pick up one of the empty cups. Oh no, I got it wrong. That's why I don't like it. I first of all ask you to choose a cup, to point at a cup. And then I pick up, and you might point to the right one, or you might point, whatever you do. And then I pick up and show you one of the empty cups. Then I say, do you want to switch or stick with what you've got? And the correct strategy is always to switch. But people don't get that intuitively. And I think it's quite reasonable not to get it. That's why I don't like it.
Because it is also, like if you ever saw that thing Noel Edmonds used to do with the box thing, that would have a similar level to it when you were asked to swap, I presume, as well. Slightly different statistic, but it would still improve the chances, wouldn't it? If you say, do you want to stay with that box or do you want to swap when you've only got two left? Would that still?
Maybe. But the point is that it's to do with a strategy rather than just a probability calculation. And you can explain it better by, say if I had 100 cups and only one of them had the prize and you point at one of them and then I remove 98 other cups, the one you pointed at and one more, well then you'd intuitively switch. Because the only way you could win is if you pointed at the right one first of all, and this only had a 1 in 100 chance. And that's the insight, though, in a way to I think, explain it best, is that the only way you're going to win is if you point at the right one first of all, and if you stick, the only way you're going to win if you pointed it at the right one straight away. So the point is, here is us chatting, talking about this. It's been gone over endlessly. I hate it. I never use it, and that's why it's not in the book.
But is it also?
I just think it's there to baffle people rather than teaching them anything about really how probability works.
Yeah, because it's such an alienating thing, because I've never seen anyone go, oh, I get it. They go, oh, right, that's mathematically how it works, exactly. Is it? And you feel still like...
what is the lesson to take from that you're going to be able to use in other problems?
Yeah, because especially if it's involving two goats and a car, which is normally a thing, and very rarely have I got two goats and a car.
Oh, isn't that amazing? I mean, some of the stuff I do in the book isn't that amazing? Like finding people with the same birthday. I mean, isn't that...
And that was amazing.
It's just amazing, isn't it? The matching phone numbers. It's just amazing. You need 20. It does work. If you've got 20 people, there's an 87% chance that two of them have got matching final two numbers of their thing. So you should be able to win money. Oh, the other good winning, the game of trays, which is quite good. Okay, can I check the audience? Okay, this is an old game used to play in the 18th century. So one person has all the clubs and one person has all the hearts, 13 cards. They shuffle them up and then turn them over one at a time together, like snap. And they get a snap if they both turn over, say, the 5, or they both turn over the 10 at the same time. Okay, if you had to bet on there being a snap or not a snap, who thinks it's more likely that there will be a snap? Who thinks it's more likely that there won't be a snap? Okay, so I'll give it away that it's a 63% chance there'll be a snap. And it's 1 minus 1 over E for the mathematicians here, by the way, which I won't go into that. There's more, and the really interesting thing, which I think is amazing, it doesn't depend on the number of cards. If each person had a whole pack of cards, they shuffled them up and turned them over one at a time, and you had to match both, exactly 4 of hearts and 4 of hearts, there's still a 63% chance of getting a snap somewhere in the pack. If there's only 5 cards, there's still a 63% chance of getting them done. So it's a good trick. If you ever want to make money off somebody, you can see your intuition was not good, find a mug and bet them. Now, you won't always win, but if you keep on doing it, you'll win nearly 2/3 of the time. And if you've got my luck, you won't win at all. But so that's something, again, which our intuition about probability is terrible.
Why do you think that is, though? I mean, psychologically, why is it that the equipment we have, obviously the way that our mind and our expectations of the world have developed must be in some ways advantageous for us to survive, and yet we have this thing with probability, chance and statistics, which is very often alienating and we feel is wrong.
Okay, this comes to the crux of the argument in the book we're jumping to, is that I believe that the reason that people find probability unintuitive and difficult is because it is unintuitive and difficult because it doesn't exist. We just made it up. Probability is not there. It's not there at all. I mean, if you could put a probability, if you have any other number, quantity, you might use temperature or distance or weight, you can measure. You can actually say, how accurate is this weight? You can weigh it, or you can time it, or you can look at its length. You can't do that with probability. I just said 63%. There's nowhere where you can find that 63 anywhere. You have to assess it by some calculation. You can't observe probabilities. You could assess them maybe by looking at a coin or whatever, but they don't exist. And that's really why I think why it was so late in developing. It wasn't until the 1650s, because people had to have this revolutionary invention of a totally new concept. They had to invent it. And so I don't believe it is part of our human capacity, our natural human capacity to understand probability. I think it's a totally alien concept, which was very late in being developed, because it's a virtual quantity that doesn't exist. A bit like imaginary numbers or something like that.
So how should that change for everyone here? How should that change our interaction with the world, and in particular our interaction with information?
Yeah, to be really cautious about any claims people make on the basis of probabilities and things like that. You've got to be really, because our intuition is poor. And that goes into, because data has got a lot of random variation in it, which is going to be probabilistic in the sense of how we think about it, then we can't easily judge whether that's sufficient evidence to decide whether a drug works or not in general, just because it's worked on 4 people or something like that, and didn't, and 10 in one group, 10 in another, and it worked in 8 of those people, but only worked in 3 for the people who didn't get the drug. Well, is that sufficient evidence? Well, no, it's not, because our intuition is very poor. We have to do the sums. So that's the whole point about the book. Is there anything to do with probability and chance? You have to sit down quietly, wrap a cold towel around your head, and think slowly about it, not think fast about it, because it's not intuitive. It's difficult.
You talk a little bit about, it's Richard Doll, isn't it, in terms of tobacco. And so can we see that the good versions...
He said, not just tobacco, I talk about his statement that he thinks anyone who gets cancer, it's a matter of bad luck. So it's just luck, whether you get cancer or not. So, and that's what he said. It's quite tough, because it all just depends on a particular mutation that happens at some point. It might not. So trying to work out the reason why you got cancer, you can work out risk factors that might have contributed, but you won't be able to work out the actual reason.
So what would you say is the least, right, we're going to go to the least worst use of probability? So one where you go, well, in this area there is some use, and then can we then have the very worst examples of when you...
Yeah, okay. Well, I think, normally in gambling and dice and all stuff like that, we're in a well-controlled situation where you can actually believe what someone's telling you, then probabilities, of course, work very well. And in well-controlled situations, for example, in insurance and annuities and pensions and things like that, with a well-defined population, we know the mortality rates on average. We might be able to model them, adjust them to the individuals more. We can never say what their risk is, because their risk doesn't exist, of course. But you can say, out of 100 people like you, we'd expect 83 to live another 10 years or something like that. It works well in some medical stuff. We've worked on risk calculators or for survival calculators for people with prostate and breast cancer, where you put in your factors and it'll tell you out of 100 people like you, we'd expect so many to live another 10 years. And in all those situations, kind of tightly controlled situations where you kind of understand what's going on, it works really well.
I'll tell you what, let's stay on the good, because you just mentioned cards, then we'll come to the worst examples. But you tell a story of basically a casino that is pretty certain that it's being scammed.
Yeah.
But it was, so tell us about this game of Baccarat.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's supposed to be a lesson in there about the difference between probability and chance, because it was at Crockford's, and Phil Ivey, who was a real high roller, was in there, and he won £6.7 million over 24 hours. It was actually split over 2 days, but and he won that. And he was playing Punta Banco, where is a fixed shoe of 4 packs, and they were putting the cards back, and he said, "Oh, don't shuffle the shoe, or don't, just leave it as it is. I'll come back tomorrow." And he won £6.7 million, and they couldn't work out how he did it. They didn't want to pay him, but they couldn't work out what he did.
And would you say it was acceptable for if you look at a win that big, that the likelihood of that? Yeah, again, I know but would you say that would immediately, the alert there you can see as 99% chance?
Well, they didn't pay out. I mean, so they were really suspicious. They looked at the CCTV, etc., and then they realised what he had done, which is edge sorting. He wasn't card counting, he was edge sorting. I don't know if this pack has got the right pattern. I don't think it has. But if you look no, it hasn't. If you look on the back of many packs of cards, especially the ones used in the casino, they have a pattern of little circles and lines, a sort of grid pattern. And for packs, before they knew about this, they weren't exactly cut in half, so you could tell the alignment of a card by where the circles intersected the edge of the card. And so he could tell whether a card was that way or that way in the shoe. So what he did was put the cards that it was 9s, and I can't remember, there's certain packs of cards. He made sure they were put back in the shoe one way, and the others were put back in the other way. So after they came round again, because he just played for hours and hours and hours, he was able to see, by looking at the shoe, what the good cards were. So it was still completely random, but his probabilities of what the next card were changed dramatically. So his personal probabilities were different from the actual chances of what the next card were. And he won £6.7 million. Anyway, they didn't pay, and he took them to court, and went to the High Court, and went to the Supreme Court, because he said, "I admitted what I was doing. I wasn't, I told the croupier, could you put them back in this way round and this way round? I wasn't covering anything up. I was completely public what I was doing." And what he did was change the definition, the official definition for cheating in this country. Because it used to be that to cheat at a game, you had to know you were cheating. And now it is, you're cheating if a reasonable person thought you were cheating. So he lost in the Supreme Court, had to pay a fortune in legal fees, and didn't get a £6.7 million.
What do you reckon? What would your judgment be?
Oh yeah, he was cheating. The fact that he was doing it quite publicly, he was cheating, yeah.
But I think it's a brilliant. Is that
clever.
cheating? I personally don't think that's cheating. I think that's working out a way to win.
Exactly. He considered it what he called advantage play.
Yeah.
So, like card counting, which is legal. It's just that casinos don't want you to do it, so they throw you out if they think you're doing it.
Yeah, the house always wins. We know that, don't we? Exactly. They're the real crooks as far as I'm concerned. So let's deal with the first story you tell. Is the story of your grandfather, Cecil. Now, why? Because as you said, the story is so important, I think, for us to understand scientific ideas and mathematical ideas. The sums themselves will not be. So why did you decide to start with this story?
I wanted to start with this whole idea that the fragility of the world in which we live in, and how the unpredictability and the role of what we might call chance, whatever that is, in our lives, whether you might call it destiny, fate, whatever you call it. And I used my grandfather because he, joined up at the beginning of the First World War, and by 1918 he'd worked his way up to being second lieutenant, and And then he ended up being brigade gas officer in the Ypres salient just after the Battle of Passchendaele, which must have been one of the most dangerous jobs there was, because he had to be continually moving, inspecting gas installations in trenches. And he lasted 3 weeks on the job, which I think was pretty good going, because we got his diary, and it keeps on saying, Straft, close call, just got through, and in the end, they got him. He got blown up. But he survived. And so he was declared B2 and then could live out the war behind the front lines. Meanwhile, his battalion, Lancashire Fusiliers, was sent to the Somme sector, which was very quiet at the time, but that was there just in time to meet the Kaiser's offensive in March 1918. 1 million German soldiers. They lost all the ground they'd taken before, and we know that they had to do counterattacks. And he was a second lieutenant. He would have had to be first out of the trench, blowing his little whistle, getting his men to follow him. So he would not be here, and I wouldn't be here. And of course, I wouldn't be here. And then I go through the whole business. Well, then he had to have my children. And then, of course, my mother had to survive. My mother was captured by pirates when she was a schoolgirl in China. She escaped from Shanghai under shell fire. My father nearly died of TB in the Second World War, survived plane crashes and things. And then they had to marry, so that had to happen. And then I had to be conceived. Have you thought about your conception? No, I know. It's really difficult. I mean, it's not just teenagers who go at the thought of their parents having sex. It really is difficult, but I finally decided at 71 I had to think about it. And I worked out that I was conceived in November 1952, and I checked the weather records. And in North Devon then, it was really cold. They got a really cold snap. And I know they were living in a pretty unheated stone cottage at the time. Well, and here I am. But I could easily not have been. Could have been, just a slight, if they'd stayed up half an hour longer to listen to the Billy Cotton band show or something, then, it wouldn't be me sitting here. It wouldn't be.
Well, that's
we
great,
wouldn't
isn't
be
it?
sitting
Thinking
here.
how lucky it was a boring night on the radio.
Yeah, exactly. So here I am.
If Tony Hancock had been on, you wouldn't be here.
I wouldn't be here, yeah, exactly.
My favourite joke about parents and sex is the one of Billy walks into his parents' bedroom and they're having sex and he goes, "Daddy, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Nothing, Billy, I'll explain later. Go back to your bedroom." And then an hour later he goes to Billy's bedroom and he hears a terrible kerfuffle going on there, and he opens the door and there is Billy having sex with his nan. And he goes, "Billy, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Yeah, Dad, not so funny when it's your mother." So anyway, love that joke. You might have to cut that out for the podcast version.
I didn't put that in there, yeah.
But that's what I love about when you talk about, when sometimes you will see evolutionary biologists going, imagine, how incredible it is that you exist because of all of these things. Yeah. And you talk about that we are all products of, and this is a word I'd never seen before, but micro-contingencies.
Micro-contingencies, I like it. All those possible little branches which happen to go this way, and we are a product of those. One single little branch, different, and we wouldn't be here. And in fact, of course, none of us would be here if, this asteroid hadn't hit the Yucatan in 66 million years ago and wiped out the non-flying dinosaurs and allowed mammals to develop. So, this is just a bit of luck that allowed us to be here. The utterly, sort of random nature of us just being here. I think it's great to think about that.
So what about, so I'm going to throw this again, not part of the book, but it's always fascinated me, and I wonder how you feel about this, is, we have possibly 200 billion stars, maybe more, in our galaxy alone. And yet many people will say, many scientists will say, we will be the only truly kind of, intelligent life form. And you're talking about 200 billion stars. And what I often hear is that physicists go, no, there must be more intelligent life. And biologists go, no, honestly, if you looked at the number of different things involved to get to this stage. So how do you feel, when we see a statistic like, with people trying to imagine that kind of thing with 200 billion stars?
I don't know. I mean, it's not my area, and I keep away from that sort of stuff. Certainly people talking about the probability of us developing in this way, which is subject to so many paradoxes because we wouldn't be thinking about it unless we were here. But there are, not just the events I'm talking about, all sorts of, what you might call chance events, which the evolutionary biologists will say, where evolution could have gone in a completely different direction and would just be, crawling slimy things on the ground. So, which is, Some of us maybe are. So
There's no time to talk about Boris Johnson's autobiography now.
No. So I keep away from those arguments about. But the point is that it's a sort of argument I would normally use if there's enough opportunities for things to happen, that even if there's a very small chance of them happening, then eventually it will happen. It's like the monkeys and Shakespeare's thing. And that works a lot of the time, that very rare events, it's like people buying lottery tickets, people do buy the lottery, even though the chance of winning is so small. So things do happen like that. But in this case, I don't know enough about how much this is just chance and how much of it is just so unique that it's unlikely to be repeated. For example, this is my example here that I use for, it's so unique, unlikely to be repeated. Can you hold that for me?
Yep, sure.
Okay. So pack of cards here, I'm shuffling this pack of cards, okay, and I open them up, and I ask you, do you think that this particular shuffle has been done before? This particular order of cards? Who thinks it's been done before? Ever. In the entire history of humanity? Yeah? No, it hasn't. Sorry, you're wrong. You could be logically, you could be correct, but the chance is so staggeringly small that I'd be prepared to I think I'd bet my life on it. Partly because you can't tell. Do that again. So that shuffle has never been done before in the entire history of humanity.
So what do you mean by that shuffle? That
order of cards. That order of cards has never appeared before.
I think you're making stuff up now.
No, okay. So if we think of how many shuffles there are, the first one can be 52, one of 52. Second one can be one of 51, so that's 52 times 51. Next one could be 50, multiply it by 50. Don't get out your calculators and try it, because if you do, very soon you'll run out of numbers on the top, and as you carry on, your calculator will explode. Because the number of possible shuffles is bigger than the number of atoms in our whole galaxy. It's 10 to 67 zeros after it. It's bigger than the number of atoms. It's unimaginably big. And even if we take into account if everybody in the whole history of humanity had done nothing all their life except shuffle cards, it's still an unbelievably, I think it's 10 to the minus 20 chance that any of them would ever have been the same. So, no, it's never been done before. I'm as confident as anything I could ever claim.
Wow, that's brilliant. That is, and just to think that someone sat in this audience is now going to waste the rest of their life trying to disprove you.
Checking, oh, look, that one's different. Yeah.
So I was kind of fascinated when you were also talking about the necessity of uncertainty, because it reminded me, in terms of for us psychologically, it reminded me of an episode of The Twilight Zone where a gangster gets shot and he goes to the afterlife, and it's an amazing afterlife, and he wins on the tables every single day. And then, of course, he realises how boring this is. Everything wins. And he goes, why have I ended up? Heaven seems such a strange... And that's, of course, when they go, you thought this was heaven? And, of course, he's in hell because there's no loss.
Awful.
There's no...
Awful. The idea of certainty, I just find it's like the dullness of knowing exactly what's going to happen all the time. It's just too awful. I think we could just take a day of it. So we live with uncertainty, and we relish uncertainty on the whole. So, let me just check. Who would like to know what they're going to get for Christmas? No? Who, when you're binge watching a thriller, look at the last episode first to see what happens? Yeah, exactly. There's always one. Okay, let's do some more difficult ones. If I could tell you when you were going to die, would you want to know? A few? Yeah, a few. Can I ask, anybody who put their hand up willing to say why they would like to know? Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
I think to be able to live life to the fullest until that moment. No wasted time.
No wasted time.
Yeah.
So you could plan things and get it sorted like that. Are you otherwise really averse to uncertainty? Do you plan holidays carefully? Or do you just let them develop?
It's 50-50.
Yeah, okay. Because it's interesting because I wouldn't want to know when I can't tell you. Sorry about that. No, there's a lot of uncertainty about all of that. But people have different tolerances for uncertainty. And I talk in the book about how some people have got a really low tolerance for uncertainty. And it's an actual clinical condition. And there are intolerance of uncertainty clinical scales that you can fill in to decide whether you, how intolerant you are. And some people have got a much bigger tolerance than others. Some people just relish not knowing what's going on, and others really kind of want to keep some control over it. And but in the end, we have to live with it, and I think it's an integral part of being human, and to enjoy and to relish, because everything would be unutterably tedious if we knew what was going to happen.
See, but I agree with you. I would love to know, I think it would be very useful to know when I was going to die. But I actually also am filled with doubt, which I love. I have no problem with doubt. It's one of the things that I love about scientific ideas. It's one of the things which is that it's always, well, I kind of believe this for the time being, but I'm ready to let it go. It's about, I don't have a religion either, but I don't have a God-shaped hole. So I think pragmatically, I would find that very useful to then have a wonderful...
Now it gets over to uncertainty in the sense of unpredictability to uncertainty in the sense of ignorance of what we don't know. And of course, that is an integral part of being uncertain. Oh, can I do my trick?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Hang on, I've got a coin. I've got to get the coin out. So you hold that. Okay. You see, I keep coins in special bags. So, okay.
Have you been on Britain's Got Talent?
Yeah. No.
You should. You're good at this. I like these games.
Okay. So, got a coin. What's the probability this is going to be heads? 50-50. Okay, so that's called aleatory uncertainty. Chance, we can't know the answer. So I flip it, whoop, cover it up. What's your probability that this is heads? Yeah, very grudging. Yeah, no. So there's a sort of grudging 50-50 coming out there somewhere. And you're almost right to be grudging, because what you've done is totally change the meaning of that probability. We turned it into what's called epistemic uncertainty. It's a measure of your ignorance, which isn't my ignorance. I know what it's come up. So my probability is 0 or 1. So that's actually quite a big lesson there, because, which I argue in the book, the business of Bayesian thinking, as it's known, means that probability is just as applicable to our personal ignorance, to epistemic uncertainty. And we do it when we talk about the probability that a fetus is going to be a male or a female. That's epistemic uncertainty. Scratch cards, that's epistemic uncertainty. It's decided whether you're going to win or not. It's just you haven't revealed it yet. So we're surrounded by epistemic uncertainty of things we could know but don't know. Really important. But the other thing is, could you look at that coin?
Yeah, sure.
Now, turn it over.
Yeah.
So
Do you want me to reveal?
Yeah.
I didn't want to reveal in case you were going to make loads of money off them later
I
on
won't
today.
make lots of money, yeah.
It's a double-headed, it's both heads.
Two-headed
So
coin.
yeah.
Okay, so even your first 50-50 was wrong, and I knew it was wrong. So what that shows us also is, first of all, you shouldn't trust me, and I wouldn't get it back. That's expensive. It's a beautiful £2 coin, presumably illegal, but never mind. But what it shows is that even that 50-50, which we were pretty confident about at the beginning, was a judgment. It was based on assumptions that I was being honest. Whoa, don't do that again. So what that reveals to me is that all probabilities are always judgments based on personal knowledge. They don't exist in the world. They are just your judgments based on what you know, and they might very well differ from person to person.
So what, in terms of gambling, if some people here do gamble on various things, what would you say, is there, again, a least worst thing to gamble on? Is there something you can really do a lot of preparation for, and you can manage to, you're never going to be 100%, obviously, but you can whittle it down to a better chance? Is there any gambling?
Yeah. I mean, in the book, I talk about a basic model for football, predicting football results. Not win or lose, but you actually predict the number of goals that are going to be scored. Because you don't make a prediction, you get a probability distribution over every combination of goals that will be scored. And you use that to compare with the odds being offered by a bookie to decide whether you should bet for or against a particular result. And that's how sports betting companies works. They do horse racing and all these things. They've got analytic models that produce probability. They don't never say what's going to happen. They predict they estimate or assess probabilities for what's going to happen, and then look for contrast between that and what the bookies are offering to see if they can make money on average. They never can guarantee they're going to do it. So I would say if you're going to gamble, spend years developing a really sophisticated mathematical model. Unfortunately, the bookies are using these models now rather than just judgment, and so it's getting increasingly difficult to beat them, because they're using very sophisticated analysts As I said, my predecessor as professor of statistics at Cambridge University left to join a sports betting company. You know, this is good employment. So I mean, otherwise, I would just go on. Of course, you could always cheat, like Phil Ivey. That's quite a recommended strategy. Or you could just do roulette. Well, at least you know the odds, and you're going to lose in the long run, but you may be lucky and win in the short run.
Well, on lucky, let's talk about that as well,
Oh, yeah.
because there are people who believe they're lucky, and there are probably even more people, especially in England, who think they're unlucky. So how do we work out who is really lucky, and why do they feel lucky?
I've been fascinated by the luck since I read some of the sort of philosophy of luck, which philosophers have been really analytic about this, and I've identified 3 broad classes of luck. And the first, which is overwhelmingly the most important in people's lives, is your constitutive luck, which is just who you were born as, over which you have zero control. What period of history, what country, what class you were, who your parents were, what your genes were, whatever characteristics you were born with, your basic health you were born with, is overwhelmingly important for your future prospects. Sadly, perhaps, because we'd love to live in a more egalitarian society, but actually who you were born as, you know, you can just think, there was some, I was enormously fortunate in my constitutive luck. And my grandfather had the bad constitutive luck to be born just in time to go into the First World War. So that's the main sort, and of course, I'd love to think that my successes, such as they are, were all due to my own struggle and my hard work, and this, bollocks. So much of it is just I was this lucky boomer born at a time with a good free education at grammar school, university, no fees, no debt, come out, what job would I like? Really, a final salary pension. Thank you very much. I don't think anyone's got them anymore. So, my generation, ate all the pies and had great constitutive luck. Then the next bit of luck is what's called circumstantial luck, which is being at the right place at the right time or the wrong place at the wrong time. Like my grandfather had bad circumstantial luck at being at that particular place when the German shell came over. And other people have bad luck at being, I talk in the book about people surviving plane crashes. They had terrible circumstantial luck at being on that plane at that time. Some people have good circumstantial luck of being, in the right place and meeting someone. I talk about Ed Smith, the Test cricketer who met his wife on a train. So that's quite good. And then the final one is your outcome luck, how that actual moment of time developed for you. Did the shell just injure you? Did you survive the plane crash? Did Ed Smith actually talk to the woman next to him? And he ended up marrying her. So the outcome luck is really, because even in good circumstances, it could go either way. And all these things are elements over which you have no control, that are kind of subject to what you might call chance, and yet have a huge impact on our lives. And so I really think we underestimate the amount that these arbitrary external things that happen to us, including who we were born as, influence us. We like to put things always down to our own characteristics, but actually, I think luck is incredibly important.
It's interesting when you were saying that. It made me think of Lawrence Fox, because I think one of the reasons that he is as he is he cannot accept that he has advantages. And there's nothing wrong with saying we have some advantages, and that has increased the luck of me being able to do what I do and you being able to do what I do. It doesn't therefore make you null and void, but it feels like there's a lot of that kind of aggression that goes on.
But exactly, coming to this quote from Richard Doll, that whether you get cancer is bad luck, or good, and that's it's quite good. Why did I do? What happened to me? Why did it? Was bad luck.
Now, you're not a Jungian, from what I can gather in the book, despite obviously being taken away by that UFO a while ago. But I just wondered, that idea of synchronicity versus, because we were talking beforehand, and I do have days where there's lots of things that happen. I don't believe it is synchronicity. I think it is just, but what increases the chances that people here will go, oh my God, that was so unusual. That really is.
It's a bit like luck. Coincidence is luck. You could say coincidence is a lucky combination of events that you didn't expect, and it has an impact. People throughout history have always thought that there may be some external force going on that makes these things happen, that wishes luck upon us. And some people do. You think it's fate, destiny, God's will, or whatever. But and Jung had this idea of synchronicity. There was this external extra force that meant that things happened together, tended to make things combine. And Rupert Sheldrake has got this idea of morphic resonance, where there's some connection. Now, of course, at a really subatomic level, we are all connected. Everything is action at a distance and all things. But I'm talking about measurable things, not just this subatomic physics nonsense that people you talk to deal with. And so at a measurable scale, I don't believe in any of that stuff. I don't believe in an external force that controls any of these things. But what I do believe in is that to an extent we make our own luck and we make our own coincidences. So that's why coincidences never happen to me and they happen to him all the time. And basically it's because I walk around staring at the ground, not noticing anything and not talking to anybody. I've done very well with it. I do recommend it. It's very English. Whereas Robin goes around noticing everything, talking yap, 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 talking to everyone he meets, and of course he makes all these connections all the time. And he notices stuff and he remembers things. I can't remember, you know, I shouldn't say this to my daughter in the audience, I can barely remember the names of my children. So you know, but anyway, so that's why they happen more to some people than others. And because I know when people write to me, somebody write to me and say, oh my God, all these coincidences keep on happening. What does it mean? And I just write back and say, no, it means you're a very observant, very sensitive person who notices what's going on in the world. And so you're bound to notice all these connections. Because only by talking to people, there's a lovely one, I think it's in the book, I'm not sure, of, you know, two women on holiday together. They didn't know each other on holiday in Rome, and they start chatting because first of all, they started chatting. And then they start swapping stories and what their sons do, and they think and they start, well, my son does it, and they find that their sons both work in the same company. And so one of them just picks up the phone and says, oh, look, I just met someone who said, and the son said, yeah, he's sitting on the desk opposite me. And it's a beautiful story of that four-way connection, which so many coincidences are, and it's absolutely lovely. Of course, she remembers that for the rest of her life. When something like that has happened, it always sticks with you. But it wouldn't have happened if she hadn't talked to them. It wouldn't happen to me, so I think the really important thing is not how many coincidences happen to it, how many don't happen, what I call latent coincidences that don't become manifest because I didn't notice anything.
See, that reminds me of that lovely story of Peter O'Toole bumping into a woman and they start chatting and she's very friendly and he can't remember why he knows her, and eventually he says, I'm so sorry, I can't remember why I know you. And she goes, well, Peter, we were married for 5 years. So one more question, and then I'm going to throw out to the audience, which is, I love the fact that randomness is not random enough. And you talk about when you used to have, what was it, an iPod? Yeah. So just tell us.
Oh, that's the fact that randomness is very clumpy, which I hoped to show earlier, but clearly, failed in. So things tend to cluster. If you do things at random, they don't sort themselves evenly out. They tend to cluster. If you throw a bag of rice up on the, and throw it down, there will be clusters, and that's why you've got to be really careful in interpreting clusters of diseases. People say, "Oh my God, we've got a cluster of diseases." Hang on. How many places are you looking at? That's not so unusual. You have to use real statistics to work out whether something is a cluster of events is beyond coincidence. And so what happens with the iPod, which used to have the iPod Shuffle, facility when I used to have an iPod, when people were complaining because they kept on hearing the same tracks or the same artists again and again. So this can't be random. So Apple had to build in a thing to make it less random, to stop it repeating too quickly, to make it look random.
That's great.
And apparently Spotify Shuffle has had to do the same thing.
Yeah, I found that
it's
fascinating.
not random.
So who would like to ask a question? There's going to be a roving mic as well. Oh, brilliant. It's Nii this time. That's good. So, yes, what would you like to ask?
Thank you very much. Sorry, you mentioned creating your own luck.
Oh, yeah.
To what extent do you think you can do this?
Yeah, it's Richard Wiseman is the professor of public understanding of psychology. He did a lot of experiments on this, and people who were considered themselves lucky or other people considered lucky, and looking at their characteristics, their personalities and things. And he concluded that actually create your own luck. It's a bit like Robin. Lucky people will tend to have a positive attitude to start with. They'll tend to look for opportunities. They're open-minded. They will be bold and take some risks, not reckless. So in fact, they go out to explore and to look. And some things will work and some things won't. But if they didn't, nothing would happen. So it's only by taking some risks that you can actually, that things could work out better than expected. You could feel yourself lucky. So I think I talk to school kids quite a lot, and I say, it's great to take risks, but don't be reckless, don't be stupid, don't whatever you do, risk things you don't mind about losing. So I think, so those are the things which, of course, maybe those are inbuilt characteristics, maybe you can't change them, but I do think that actually having a more outgoing, exploratory, bold attitude can bring you good things.
Yeah, Richard's book's the luck factor. I think
Luck
you can
Factor, that's
and
it,
I
yeah.
can't remember. There's one, isn't there, which is basically people who thought they were lucky always found the thing that was in the newspaper that said you can have £20, and people who thought they were unlucky never saw it. That's a very kind of. But it was basically they were given the same information, but the people who believed they were unlucky did not see the prize that was waiting there.
It's reverse causation in that sense, because that it's not that they were unlucky. They consider themselves unlucky because they don't have that characteristic. Yeah. So you should be, by this, you should be a lucky person. Are you a lucky person?
I think I am now, because I'm a lot more positive and because I don't have anxiety anymore. And I think it does mean that I meet a lot of interesting, and I do, I say yes to pretty much everything, whether there's money or not. And I just go, yeah, I'll come to your library, I'll do that. And that means that the number of times that I meet someone with a weird connection, or the number of times that I find a story that takes me somewhere else, or like I met a woman who was amazing, and I didn't know this. She told me about her grandmother and the paintings that she had in the house, and I was actually doing a gig in her house, and then at the end, for some reason, I suddenly mentioned the author Jean Rhys. I wasn't meaning to mention, but I did, and she put her hand up. She went, oh, by the way, it was my grandmother who rediscovered Jean Rhys down the road, and she's the reason that Wide Sargasso Sea exists. So that, and that's just because I'd had so many conversations.
And you could say that was lucky.
Yeah.
But
I love things like that.
Yeah.
So who else would like to ask a question? Back there. Yes, just behind you there. Thank you.
Hi. I want to ask, given that most of our kind of interesting questions in the world are usually about causal relationships rather than correlatory relationships, how much do you think, but also like maybe because we're warned by statisticians not to get confused, how much do you think statistics can actually answer the
What an
cause?
excellent question, because I happen to have an entire chapter on causality, which most books don't. And this has become, there's growing interest in this because of what's called attribution. In other words, what I deal with, the thing is, we got September 2023 was a real hate wave, it was lovely. Was that caused by man-made climate change? The typical examples where this has been done in the past, where someone has cancer who worked in a chemical works, they've been exposed to carcinogenic substances, was their cancer caused by the substance? And that's part of civil legal reasoning, and basically you've got to establish that the probability of causation was greater than a half, because in civil cases it's balance of probabilities rather than beyond reasonable doubt. And so I talk in the book about how people use epidemiological evidence to develop a probability of causation, which is which is now accepted piece of language within the civil legal field. And it's starting to be developed within attribution studies in climate change. What's the probability that this particular weather event was caused by man-made climate change? So I talk quite a lot about how people do that assessments. The meteorological office in this country now has got an attribution centre which does rapid attribution studies to do these analyses. So this is quite a new, delicate area. And of course, it moves into the legal sphere. And so when people start bringing legal cases because of damage due to man-made climate change, this is going to become even more relevant. But it's already established, the idea of probability of causation is already established within the legal world. And it's a fascinating area, which tends not to be covered very much, but I think it's going to become a lot more important.
Because that reminds me, there was phone masts, wasn't there? About 15 years ago, a big thing about phone masts and linked to illness, and then looking at why, in fact, it was not the way it had been specifically, well, not specifically designed, but they were seeking the answer, and so it started from the position of the person, right, they were there, now let's draw a circle which is a different way round, isn't it?
Exactly, and the point in the book I make, there's a difference between general causation and specific causation. General causation are the sort of arguments like, which I deal with, does Diet Coke give you cancer? and which include no. No strong evidence for that at all. But that's sort of general causation. Is this a risk factor in general? But then you get the specific causation. Did it give you your cancer? Which now, which is a sort of court case that people, similar for vaccine injuries and all sorts of things, this becomes a big part of legal claims, is assessing probability of causation. You can never say it, for certain this, but you don't have to win a civil legal claim.
And you also, I can say, the book will make you less fearful of burnt toast, which I feel was very important.
Yeah.
Who else would like to ask a question? Oh, we've got one right down here, right at the front. Yes, you keep your hand up, and the mic. Thank you. The mic will come, and then we'll come over there.
One right at the back.
And then run up. Yeah, we'll go bom bom bom. Yeah, great.
Yes, you mentioned very briefly AI as it is more and more probabilistic and people are more and more using it.
Yep.
And it's everywhere in our life. To what extent do you think AI is going to change our world in terms of probabilistics?
Oh, yeah, it'll change lots of stuff, but that's not what I deal with. I'm interested in the capacity for AI to deal with uncertainty, which I used to work on 40 years ago. We thought we'd solved it. Uncertainty in artificial intelligence was a really active topic in the mid-1980s, and I was writing at the beginning of that. And we thought we'd solved it, but then these fantastic, extraordinarily large language models come along, which have no concept of doubt about what they're saying. They say everything is delivered with absolute confidence, and then at the bottom they say, this may be wrong. Now, this seems to me a very retrograde form of uncertainty communication, to be absolutely confident and then say, yeah, but sometimes I just make things up. Really, they should be able to do better than that. And this is a very active area to see if large language models and any AI I believe, should have a well-calibrated confidence statements when it makes a claim, a factual claim. A lot of it is just interpreting evidence, texts and things like that. That's all right, summarizing text, that's all fine. But when it's making a factual claim, it should be able to, I want to know how confident you are about this and why you're saying it. So there's a lot of interest in this now, and I think this is going to be a developing area, because everyone knows that this actually is deeply untrustworthy to just make confident claims and then say, well, sometimes I hallucinate. Yeah.
And we've got a question just over there.
I'm just interested to know what you, given you clearly have a lot of experience in interrogating data, what you made of the treatment of data in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic, and what your best guess on the true levels of lethality actually were, especially in the UK.
Yeah, I've written a whole book on this with Anthony Masters. Yeah. So the initial assessments of lethality, which were made in March 2020, were extraordinarily accurate, the pre-vaccine accurate, with an unbelievable age gradient. That's why it's always pointless to talk about average lethality, because the infected fatality rate just varied 10,000-fold between whether you were 8 or 80. So it's a staggering difference in lethality, which closely mirrored our normal risks of dying, because that's the sort of risk. And in fact, they tracked each other almost perfectly. Though if you got COVID, it just represented pre-vaccine about a year's worth of risk, which I thought was a really good idea, which was widely misunderstood and reported as saying, COVID doesn't increase your annual risk of death. No, yeah, it doubles it. No, come on, it's the same. But I didn't mean the same like not, it's the same, meaning it doubles it. Anyway, so I wasn't very clear in my communication. But of course, everything with vaccines, that all changed, and with the changing variant as well, or the lethality changed. But the initial estimates were amazingly accurate.
I remember asking when that book came out, saying, did you look at all towards the future and predict anything? And again, that was a good result. You went, nope, I'm not going anywhere near that, because there's just too much uncertainty. Yeah. I'll tell you what, oh yeah.
Follow-on question, which is just, you may have no view and say it's not your area, but what did you make of the conflation between of COVID and with COVID in terms of the deaths?
Oh, in terms of death.
Why were they not defined singly?
Yeah. No. That was, I wrote a lot about that. The fact that the deaths of with and of COVID, and you could deconstruct that pretty well from death certificates that were issued afterwards. But that wasn't clear in the daily data. And the point is that, like all these things, the data being released each day was actually not a great representation of what was really going on, but it's what got the headlines because it came out every day at 4 o'clock. And yet it was really, as much as anything else, it was very low on Sundays and Mondays and then shot up on Tuesdays, which meant the Evening Standard had headline after headline about COVID deaths soar. I've got a whole thing of all these headlines saying COVID deaths soar. And the only thing that united all these, they were all on Tuesdays. Well, I think people like me did a fair amount of coverage, and a lot of the science reporting I think was pretty good. It's when it went on to the popular reporting and some of the political reporting. I couldn't believe that a year in that someone in the Evening Standards didn't realise that Tuesdays was always a high day for numbers. I mean, it's just staggering.
And yeah, if you watch Dr. Kevin Fong giving his, when he was on that committee recently, talking about what was actually going on in the hospitals as well, I think that was something that was very underreported. That we had a question right. Oh,
right at the back. Yeah.
I think we've got time for
we'll come back to
two more, so let's do one at the back and one at the front. Before we do that, I just want to let everyone know that you're welcome to hang around here for half an hour after the show to have a drink, and the restaurant Rucola is open upstairs.
And we've never talked about why there's a double yolked egg.
Oh,
on that side. No, don't, because then they have to buy it.
Oh, right. Okay.
It's a bit of capitalism I've been working on.
Eggs. Yes.
So I won't ask why is it a double yolked egg.
Oh, no.
I think this links a little bit to the previous question, but where I think we've all felt, or maybe I have, that my intuition about probability is terrible.
Yep.
Yeah, I would always guess wrong. Do you think there are examples where government and leadership have either not spent enough time, but where they've got probability wrong and we've ended up with decisions that have negatively affected?
Oh dear, I'm not...
I mean, there are definitely COVID examples.
That's too difficult to say a single decision on which that's based. I would say that there's a general misunderstanding of it and a general, when people hear increased risk, go, oh, we've got to stop an increased risk and this sort of nonsense, where we really should look at what the real risk is. The example I got in my book is a great story on, which is a wonderful headline in the Daily Telegraph about how binge watching your box set could kill you. And because it increased your risk of a pulmonary embolism. And when you dug down, and I had to download the study from Japan and look at it carefully, I worked out that in order to expect your pulmonary embolism, you were going to have to watch 5 hours a night of television for 19,000 years. So I don't think it is necessarily going to kill you. Yeah. So the point is that mixing up of relative and absolute risk is, I think it's very common in the media. You hope that in policy making, it's not so common. And people actually do think, what does it mean for 1,000 people? What does it mean for 100 people? Which is the right way, always, to think about risks.
Thank you.
And then where was the final mic? There we go.
Thank you. The last question I have for you is, what are 3 concrete actions we could all take today to validate the sources that we're reading, whether it's AI, news, or headlines? What are just 3 things we can all do?
Yeah, I got that in the book. It's looking for the trustworthiness of the source is what you should be assessing all the time. Can you trust this source of information? And the first one I would say is, why am I being told this? Who wants me to know this? This number is this hasn't just arrived at me. If I hear something on the news, read it on social media, think, why am I being told this? Whose interest is it in it? Then you ask, who is it who's telling me this? So this is even before looking at the number or the claim, looking at its source and the motivation behind them. I do that first of all, because I just say, I'm not going to listen to this anymore. If this is by, the Nut Council or something, some survey of how nuts are going to do you good, I can't be bothered to read this anymore. And so you check all of that stuff. And then the final question, you really should start looking at what is actually being claimed. And then it's a bit tricky, because then you're looking at the trustworthiness of, well, basically the 3 questions is this source trustworthy? Is the number trustworthy? In other words, can you actually believe the claim? And the final thing is the interpretation trustworthy? Are they claiming, the number might be right, but are they claiming this is a cause when actually it's a correlation? Are they claiming this is a really big problem where in fact it's not a big problem, like the pulmonary embolisms? In other words, is this a big number? So the three things, the importance of can you trust the source? Either can you trust the number, can you trust the interpretation? So that's basically all school kids should be taught this. This should be an absolute part of the curriculum to deconstruct a claim that they get on social media and just go through that. Bonk, bonk, bonk.
I was going to say a good place to watch this in action is debates between Democrats and Republicans about Roe versus Wade at the moment, because the misuse by Republicans of stats to justify the draconian, the loss of so many rights due to
and that might cover all things, whether you can trust the source, whether you can trust the number being used, and certainly whether you can trust the interpretation. Often the number can be right, because people often don't just make up numbers. It's what they do with it that's often wrong, and the misinterpretation of it.
Well, if you would like to know more about likelihood and chance on double-yolked eggs, there's a lot more than that in this. It's incredible. This is about your longest one for a while, isn't it?
It would have been longer, but the editor did cuts.
Yeah, it covers so many ideas, and we barely grazed the surface of any of them. But thank you very much to the Conduit Club and the How To Academy, and thank you very much to David Spiegelhalter.
Thank you very much.